We're going to start off with a land acknowledgement today. So Oakhead University acknowledges the ancestral and traditional territories of the Mississauga of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat, who are the original owners and custodians of the land on which we live, work, and create. We would also like to acknowledge those who came here involuntarily as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. And with that, I'd like to welcome you to Encounters with Artists. I'm KYRA, I'll be your facilitator for the evening, and I'd just like to tell you a little bit more about what exactly we're doing here. Encounters with the Artists is a year-long research project that delves into the practices of a few established Canadian artists. Over the course of a year, we hosted a total of 4 interviews, and today, we are so proud to be hosting an artist whose work challenges, remembers, and reclaims history, June Clark. A little bit more about our group. Encounters with Artists consists of several upper year OCAD students, with help from Professor Derek Sullivan, MFA candidate Emmett Lewis, and artist Max Dean. When preparing for these interviews, might cut out. Oh, no, she's okay, she's back. Sorry about that. We do extensive research into an artist's practice, and then we come together as a group to discuss what interested us, but most importantly, what we still want to know. After this, we brainstorm questions before finally selecting those that we, as a group, find most interesting and engaging. You can think of this as kind of a deep dive into what art students are wondering about contemporary artists today. After our preparations over the last couple months, we are so excited to finally be meeting with June. This project was made possible through the generous support of Lady Elizabeth Pixie Mudge Massey Shaw, who is in the audience tonight. So thank you so much. Now I'm going to hand off the mic to Isabella to give us a proper introduction to June Clark and her work. Thank you.
Hi everyone. So tonight we have the pleasure of interviewing renowned artist June Clark. Born in Harlem, New York in 1941, June immigrated to Toronto in 1960. Some of June's earliest work features photographs of Toronto and its people. The images present a story of June's search for familiarity in a new city, intertwined with the lives and narratives of the places and the people that she photographed. Well known for her photographic practice, June co-founded the Women's Photography Cooperative in the 1970s that empowered female photographers. Notable is up until this point in time, these women were not allowed to use the University of Toronto's darkroom. Back again. Notable as these women were not allowed to use the University of Toronto's darkroom facilities. The group's subsequent 1972 exhibition, Photographs of Women by Women, eventually toured across Canada. June has since exhibited in numerous prominent spaces internationally, including exhibitions in Ecuador, Austria, Paris, and New York, as well as locally in Toronto. Some of her significant shows include Witness, an institutional survey held at the power plants in 2021. Witness featured several well-known bodies of work created throughout her career, such as Family Secrets, Harlem Codes, and Homage, a very personal exhibition that explored how history, memory, and identity have shaped June's work. June's work was also featured in a powerful solo exhibition, Unrequited Love, which exhibited at the AGO in 2024, in which she investigated the American flag as both symbol and material. With an impressively expansive career in visual arts, June's work has taken many different forms, often using media such as photography, installation, sculpture, etching, and collage. Equally impressive, her educational endeavors include teaching numerous art and studio courses at Canadian institutions such as York University, the University of Guelph, and our own home institution at PATEL. She holds a bachelor's and a master's of fine arts degrees from York University. Her work resonated deeply with many of us in the Encounters group for a multitude of different reasons. Whether that be because of her experience with immigration, her exploration of memory and personal history, or her compelling use of intervention and materials as grammar within her art, June's practice speaks to a vast and diverse audience. We are incredibly excited to present to you June Clark. Also welcome our amazing panel of interviewers who will now introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, my name is, oops, sorry, here we go. Hello, hello, hola. Hola again?
No.
Not yet, no yet.
Nothing.
Okay, hello, hello, hello. Okay.
You want mine? Here, take
Okay,
it.
well, yeah.
Sorry about that. Thank you so much.
Hi everyone, my name is LUISÉ CISNEROS and I am from the program of Sculpture and Installation. I'm in my 4th year
Perfect. And I'm Billie McFarland. I'm in my 3rd year of drawing and painting at OCAD here. And I think that we should just get into it since we've been waiting for a couple months to do this. So are you ready?
No,
No, that's okay. You don't have to be ready. We are, though. So just a little bit of background. You immigrated here because of conscription specifically, to avoid conscription into the army for the Vietnam War. Your husband,
yes.
Your husband was going to be conscripted, and so you guys came here together. And so just a little bit of background for the audience there. And so the first time that I encountered your work in person was the Unrequited Love show at the AGO. And the show featured altered American flags, let's say. And I was struck by the idea of a single person taking on something so powerful and so big. And so despite coming at it from a very personal angle, which I know that all of your work is from a personal angle, have you ever thought that the flag was too large or too complex a symbol for one person to reckon with?
No.
No?
I wouldn't say I came to it through that. If you saw all of the dates, this was over a period of about 25 years, and it had more to do with me coming to terms with a symbol that had been drummed into me from grade 1. As I say, when you, the first day of school, you were taught to stand, put your hand over your heart, and pledge allegiance to the flag, not the country, not the president.
To the symbol, to the material.
To the symbol.
Yeah.
And the love of it is instilled in you until the day you leave in grade 12.
Right. So as opposed to like engaging with the flag of this in this kind of like like argumentative or like it's not like that, right? It's this feeling of like love and reckoning with that love, or
I'd say it was a kind of therapy because, as I say, over the years in downtime, I would find myself doing something with the flag.
Right.
It was moral disengagement when I was absent-mindedly. I didn't set out to do unrequited love.
Right.
I think I probably was trying to deal with my own need for therapy.
Right.
And
so then
I pulled the threads and looked up, and around the studio, there were all of these images of flags.
Yeah.
And it didn't occur to me. And I looked around and I went, girl, get a grip. I think I told you that.
Yeah.
Because I didn't realize I was doing it.
Right, and you've said specifically about this that this dealing with the flag has been this process, this 25-year process of deprogramming yourself. So can you talk a little bit more about what that means and how that process has been for you?
Well, again, to realize that the symbol, just a symbol, could conjure such emotion. And again, I went to school, I guess the first time was in 1945-46, just after the war. All of my teachers were women, and they were Jews, and they were Italians. And they taught me to love books, to love music, to love the flag, to love where I grew up.
Right.
Because they were coming from a horrific number of years. So, I mean, think about Jews and Italians in the 40s.
Yeah.
You know, and they were probably immigrants as well.
Right.
Talking about being an immigrant,
what is your thought about like and your sentiments towards the Canadian flag?
Again, no one here loves the Canadian flag the way I was taught to love the American flag. All I can say is that I am incredibly grateful for Canada, incredibly grateful for Pierre Trudeau, the smart one, and the idea that we came across the border at a time when it was possible to apply for landed immigrant status at the border, which is wonderful in a way, but in a sense, if the guy in the booth didn't like his eggs that morning, he could have just told you to turn around and go back. So it was a bit nerve-wracking, but I am incredibly grateful for being able to come here through that.
What do you think it will be the benefit for others to deconstructing those national symbols, like pulling those threads of their own flags? So I am from Mexico, I was born in Mexico, and I always think about that, especially living here in Canada. So I'm wondering, what do you think of, because of your work, what do you think other people will think, but also like, do you have a goal with that? And what it will be the benefit of deconstructing that?
I couldn't say. I couldn't say how you would feel about the Mexican flag or
other countries.
Other countries. Again, I don't know any country that has that kind of relationship to such a symbol.
Yeah.
It's very, very hard to you know, I can tell you what I'm thinking with each piece, but I can't, as I say, it wasn't, I didn't set out to deconstruct the flag. I set out to come to terms with why my heart would beat when I would see it flowing in the wind.
But in order to do that, you had to deconstruct it, right? Like you had to manipulate it or to change it or engage with it in some way.
Yes.
Like you couldn't necessarily take it as it was because it didn't stand for all that you were indoctrinated into believing that it stood for, right?
Right.
Is that
yes. And again, for instance, this one, that's on canvas. It's acrylic on canvas, so I painted that myself, and it's a full-scale flag. And I did that when I didn't have a studio. I did that on my third floor, and
just lighting an American flag on fire on the third floor.
Acrylic paint on canvas, and I would light it and then stamp it out. And the one in the middle almost got away from me. And it wasn't until, I guess, a month after, and I thought, oh my God, I could have burnt.
The art always comes first, doesn't it?
Again, I come up with an idea for the flag, and I just have to do it. And then realize and think about why I did it.
Right, and often those kind of ideas that you come up with are this kind of destruction and reconstruction with materials of the flag that I think work towards that sentiment of like, yes, this is something that is powerful, but also it's something that is full of lies or full of like.
Well, no, I mean, for this one, it's inherent, and when you think about the forming of the United States, it was formed in violence. It was formed with guns and burning and destruction.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So when you immigrated to Canada, the U.S. had a similarly, again, charged and divisive political climate as it does now. Are there any parallels that you can draw between then and now? And how are you handling the ongoing situation between Canada and America's relationships?
I'm not handling it very well.
I don't think any of us are.
It's not the same. It's not the same.
The relationship?
Time, there were smarter people trying to lead the country. I'll tell you, I'm terrified.
Yeah.
I think that the United States is acting like 1938 Germany.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's how I feel.
that's a parallel that has been drawn before. I've heard that, yeah. And that's pretty scary. And so I guess how is the way that the world and the relationship between America and itself, or America and Canada, informing the ways that you're working currently?
I'm making a piece for the Studio Museum. I don't know if you know this. I was just saying to Derek and Emmett and Lucas that the Studio Museum is building a new building, and they have asked alumni, I was a resident in the 90s, alumni they've commissioned all of us to do a piece to open the new building.
Okay.
The piece I'm working on has to do with my culture and the fact that we just keep doing what we do.
Is like doing what we do is in like perpetuating violence, or
No.
Like,
no, I'm talking about my culture.
Oh, your personal.
From Harlem.
Okay, as a Black American.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
That we are inherently peaceful, really,
Right.
and I'm just doing a piece that says we know who we are. We cherish the knowledge of ourselves.
Okay, no, it's still not working.
It's not working.
No, sorry.
It's okay. Just grab it whenever you want it.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's really beautiful, the work that you're doing right
I
now,
hope-
and
hope
it
the
sounds
piece-
amazing. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah.
I wonder about your relationship.
When is it opening? The Studio Museum building. Ask that.
Sorry, what? You go ahead.
I'm just wondering. I just wanted to know, when is that museum building opening?
In the fall.
Thank you.
Let us know, please.
But
It'll be
it's
amazing.
due in about 10 days.
We feel the pain. We know that. We know that pain. One of the things that we were wondering is about your relationship with Toronto. I know that you have had some works that you have done here, and especially a lot of your work talks about Harlem. And we're wondering, what is your relationship with Toronto? In my personal experience as an immigrant, I'm still looking for home, and sometimes Toronto, especially in these days, doesn't feel so much like home. And I'm wondering about you. I'm wondering about like your relationship.
The problem is you can never find home unless you go back. And it's different, and you have to adapt. And that's what immigrants have to do constantly, daily. I'm still adapting. But Toronto affords a very, very nice place to adapt. And I say that it was the best place for me to bring up children at the time.
Can you elaborate a little bit of your experience back then when you moved to Toronto, and if you see any parallels like what is happening now, especially like with the political situation that is happening in the United States? We're expecting a lot of people will wanted to move to Canada. We are also thinking about like the atmosphere here in Canada. There's a lot of talk anti-immigration. So do you know any parallels like between when you moved here, how was the situation back then and like now?
Well, when we first moved here, there was an anti-American atmosphere here. A lot of people now say that they're grateful that we came, but at the time, it was not that pleasant. But there, you know, we were all together, so it was easy to live and being American, you just get on with it.
And how do you practice over the years change when you have shown as an example internationally or like here in Canada or in the United States, and how that has informed your practice? 'Cause, I mean, like, sometimes I wonder, like, as being an immigrant, and when you're showing, like, here in Canada, where you're showing back home in Mexico, as an example, it changed a little bit the talks and the context of the work. So I'm wondering about you. You always think about that, and you always, like, I don't know, when you show your work here or when you show it in the United States, that conversations that I wonder if you speculate about those conversations, or how is that working for you?
Well, when I wouldn't say I change. It's just the way the work is received from different people. I showed a piece in Paris, and I remember a woman from California came, and she was very moved by it. It's the viewer. I don't believe that I change the way I work depending on where it's shown or anything like that. It's the viewer that changes and receives it. And as I always taught, once you make work, it doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to the person standing in front of it.
Yeah, nice.
So are there any works that you feel like that you have made in the past that have taken on new meanings for you, or maybe for the audience that does receive them in, like, right now?
Well, again, they do have a life of their own, and there is a piece in the Whispering City that, depending on who is looking at it, I'm always surprised at what happens.
At what it means?
At what it means. You know, for instance, this piece, that was at the AGO. And I received an email. This was done as you say, as you see in '94. I received an email from someone who was just casually in the AGO, and she said that she stopped. Her mother is in that image.
Oh, wow.
Exactly.
That's surprising.
And she said she just had to sit down. She couldn't believe it because her mother is dead now.
Wow.
And she couldn't believe that her mother, and I just happened to be on Bathurst Street and heard drums, and there was a parade going by.
And so you took this photograph?
Photographed
Yeah.
them, yes. And there she is. And the thing is, the way this is done is every time I printed it, the ink was different. So it just so happened I caught her at the end, at the edge.
Wow, that's like serendipitous. So we know that, like, you have moved away from photography in your practice, but you still do use imagery. Still use imagery in your installation works, and you use your own photographs.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering, how do images play a role in your work, and how has the function of imagery changed over time?
Again, the Whispering City that you just saw, the text is 25 years away from the image. That image was done, the photograph was done in the 70s.
And like you superseded the text on, like you put.
And then no, that text was found text.
Okay.
But when I learned how to etch, I realized I had all of these photographs, and that was when I was walking around trying to hold on to home. And then I realized that in the 90s, why I really made the images in the 70s, because the text rose to the surface. And then I married the text with the image.
So just to understand this correctly, that person was holding the sign, but the sign had a different text on it, and then you put that text on there?
It was a religious parade.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Right.
And then so you
she was holding.
Right.
Yeah.
Like
So
a protest
it's
sign.
found text.
Yeah. And so then you're taking these photographs that you took 20 years ago and you're repurposing them or using them to new ends.
Repurposes,
right. And so I'm just going to ask you, like, what prompted your move away from photography as your primary medium, and what drives you to explore new mediums?
I went to York to see what was new in photography.
Okay.
But you had to take the whole course, and I signed up for printmaking and fell in love with it. And I had the most amazing teacher, and I fell in love with photo etching.
How does the function of those, like, how does employing those techniques, like, change the photographs for you, or like, what about those techniques draw you to them?
That was liberating, because throughout the 70s and early 80s, I was doing, I guess you could say it was documentary, but I was just doing a lot of street photography, and hung on Ansel Adams and Walker Evans and Dorothea Lange and all of that, and taught myself, well, we taught ourselves how to see so that you had no problem in the darkroom. What you photographed was what you were going to get.
Yeah.
Okay, so the photograph was sacred, and you weren't supposed to mess with it.
And so, like,
then when I went to York,
you get to mess with it.
No. What liberated me was Steinberg. You know the
Gloria Steinberg?
No. The photographer and illustrator.
Okay.
And he photographed the street, but also drew on the photographs.
Wow.
And turned dressers into buildings and things like that.
Okay. Huh.
And I went, oh my God, this is amazing. So he gave me permission to play with photographs.
To take the document and transform it into something that's even more than what it is.
That's exactly right.
Cool.
One thing that I can see within you work with the photographs or with the objects is that you work with like the souls. It could be the souls of the persons, or it can be the soul of the object that are imprinted, like maybe from the people who use them or where you get them from. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that, because to me it sounds about like the spirits, or like how the objects are impregnated with somebody else, like a soul or a spirit. We have an interview from the AGO, and you mentioned that are like objects or photographs capture sometimes like the essence of the people, or sometimes the spirit of the person. And especially in Mexico, I found that really interesting, that like a long time ago when like the camera arrived in Mexico, many people were scared of like taking their pictures because they were like, they're gonna trap my soul.
Still are.
And I'm wondering if you can talk us about that, because I feel like you captures people's souls, and even when you revisit sometimes like other works that they talk about photographs, they take a new meaning and a new like spirituality in a way. And I'm wondering if you can elaborate a little bit on that.
I wouldn't say that I feel that.
Okay.
I believe that when I snap the camera, that I am having something familiar, something that touches me. There's a whole series of Patricia, and we were just hanging out. And so there are a lot of, as she was talking, I made the image, but I wouldn't say I was trying to get something from her. I was trying to illustrate what was touching me.
Okay. Wow, that's fascinating.
Almost like in taking other people's photographs or working with other people, you're looking for yourself, and like you're looking.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I set out, but something familiar emerges, and you have to make the photograph at that instant.
And we know that, like from other interviews, you talk about that, like in the process when you're taking pictures, like almost like the person is calling you and you go to that person. It's like almost an intuition that you have.
Intuition is.
And it's something that I like, to me, it is really fascinating. And I'm wondering, like, in terms of like, how did that like changes you? What do you want to photograph? You say that you're looking for something that is like from your perspective.
I'm not sure if I'm looking
Okay.
as much as recognizing
Okay. Oh, I love that
the
word.
instant.
Yeah. And how do you build that intuition? How do you discover that intuition? How did that happen? Just naturally? It just came? And,
Yeah.
and how to develop it through the
Again,
years?
with photography, you know, I just started again looking for the familiar, and like anything else, as I've said, with a kid, if you encourage them, they continue, and people started saying they liked what I was doing, and so I sought like-minded people, and that's how I found the Baldwin Street Gallery, and Laura and Lisa and Pam and all the women who were also learning.
That's fascinating. And for you, what was the difference between, like, because you have used photography in different ways. Like there's a project that you put in your hip and you were just taking.
That was the Harlem quilt.
Exactly. And there's another one, like there are more portraits, and then they look. How did, like, your intuition chooses which one is better for
Well,
which
with the
pattern,
Harlem quilt, it was very traumatic for me to receive the residency at the Studio Museum. So, I mean, the Studio Museum's on 125th Street, and I grew up on 118th. And so it was, again, I went back, and everything had changed, and as I say, nothing had changed. And so I was trying to come to terms with where I was living again, and I didn't want to editorialize the neighborhood, so which is why I set the camera in the morning.
Almost like if you were to editorialize, you're making yourself an outsider and performing this kind of anthropological study on Harlem, and that's not necessarily where you were coming from or what you wanted to achieve through looking. I think like is the heartbreak coming from the fact that like you would think that things would have changed and things hadn't changed? Yeah,
and things
yeah.
hadn't changed.
Yeah.
And again, I wanted to figure out where I was.
Yeah.
And which is why I had it at my hip. I didn't want to
Like bias the.
be.
yeah.
That's exactly
Yeah.
right.
Huh.
Interesting.
So you often, like as we mentioned before, that you revisit your materials a lot. You use your own photographs and things like that. So do you find that your relationship with certain things like tools or photographs or textiles have evolved over time? Or do they hold the same weight for you as when you first engaged them?
No, they've evolved.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Because you learn.
Yeah.
You learn in the studio, and something can be sitting there for a few years, and all of a sudden you realize you can use that tool or that. I mean, I collect a lot of, all artists do,
Yeah.
and so.
Little pack rats.
Yeah, that's right. And you never know. It's just the maturity.
Is there any material specifically that you feel like has really kind of evolved with you over your practice?
Rust.
Rust. Can you talk about that? That's like an unusual thing to work with, right?
I find it incredibly beautiful. It comes in so many colors, from orange. Look at that. I mean, how beautiful can that be? And so again, the railroad ties or spikes I use a lot because of the Underground Railroad and what that all means,
Yeah.
as well as my father in the 30s rode the rails. He grew up on a farm, and he
like
was
11.
He was 11 when he and his brothers had to leave because there was no work.
Yeah.
And so he basically rode the rails across the United States, just about in every state. And when he was 11, and he had 4 or 5 brothers, and he saw his brother beaten to death by a railroad cop. And when you're 11, what do? You just have to keep going. You
Yeah.
can't do anything else. So the railroad and the rust are all part of my heritage.
Right. And the rust too is like this symbol of decay, and it's a process of
But
decay.
beauty.
And also, like it also speaks to the resilience of the material as well, right? Like that the
Yes.
material can become so degraded, become so broken down, and still be fully intact and have all of its signifiers still in it. Yeah.
Useful, yeah.
Is it your turn?
No, I think you continue with the.
Oh, Daniel Ferreira.
Yes.
So, in the witness show you did at the Daniel Ferreira Gallery, there were some works that included some like old farm tools, and you said in an interview something to the effect of that the objects have the spirits imbued, that the objects have spirits and that they're imbued with the work. Hello? Hello? We're having some technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Okay. Is this good? All right. I don't know if I can go louder. So you said something to the effect that the objects they have spirits and that they're imbued with the people who work with them. So my question is it only physical touch that imbues objects with energy, or does the viewer transmit energy to the object from looking at it?
Again, I can't speak for a viewer. I can only speak for myself, and as I'm manipulating the tools or the objects, I can conjure people who've come before me, and they give me permission, and they tell me to keep going, and they tell me what's good, what's bad.
Wow. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Okay. You've mentioned that materials are grammar of your visual. Oh, it's back?
one?
No,
Something
which one?
back.
Hello, hello. Is this
Yes.
one bad? Yay! Put on the microphone. Thank you. You have mentioned that materials are the grammar of your visual language. Could you elaborate on that quote that you mentioned?
It's my grammar. What can I say? I like copper, and I like steel, and what it does when it ages or sits, and that's my grammar. I mean, that's my way of communicating emotions and thoughts.
Yeah. Like,
So
do you think? Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna
That's okay.
just let me add a little bit. So the grammar is the material. So the grammar is the structure of the language, and the language is the thing that provides ideas. And so you're using the material as the structure for the ideas that you're communicating. And that's what the statement means. Okay, perfect. Thank you. just trying to understand that.
To me, like, I find it really unique the way that I feel that you have your own language and you're creating a new language, especially for us immigrants. So I really appreciate that because I see a lot of like stories that you talk and I relate to them too.
Oh, really?
So,
Good.
and it's
Great.
really impressive that I understand the language that you're creating in that way and I don't need an interpreter. So it's really beautiful. Do you think that in this case you're creating objects that they have autonomy, or do you think that each object comes with their own autonomy? So, like, in terms of like, we're thinking that like the objects because they have a context, but they are creating in a context, you are removing them from the context, and you're creating your own context for that object, or you think that like anyone will see.
Yes,
what they will say.
that's the Perseverance Suite in terms of the tools. These were tools for hard work. I am not trying to obscure the tools, but I'm making them inoperable and into something else.
Wow.
What happens to a tool when it becomes inoperable? Like, how does it change? Does it become an idea? Like, it ceases.
That's a fork.
But like, it ceases to serve its purpose, and its purpose becomes idea based solely, right? And so, like, the material, it brings its own history, but it becomes transformed through becoming inoperable. Like, there's a lot in your work. There's a lot of this kind of dismembering or defiguring or like changing something, making something not what it is, and in a specific way of like rust, or like it's being pulled apart, it's being destroyed. But that destroying doesn't necessarily negate its importance. If anything, it can add more importance to something. And so like you're speaking in terms of like we have had to persevere, and that perseverance has given us new insights. Yeah.
And it was important for me with perseverance to marry the domestic with the field. And that was my grandmother's plate. And so because my culture, I didn't have a stay-at-home mom, and all the women had to work arm in arm with the men. So it's important for me to have that marriage.
Right. And so this brings us like perfectly to the next question, because you said that this is your grandmother's plate, and you often, your work often involves repurposing like objects with a history and personal objects. So how do you navigate the tension between perseverance and transformation? So like if you're using your grandmother's plate and it becomes the art, do you take it back into your collection afterwards, or is that its final kind of place?
No, someone
And so
bought
do you ever feel like you shouldn't ruin something, or you shouldn't use something for art because it's too important or too precious?
Yes, I have. And again, this was, I've had these since my mother kept them, and my kids grew up with these, and after a while, you have to say something. And maybe my grandmother's sitting on my shoulder saying, use this. I don't know, but I have things in the studio that I won't use for a while, and then they say, all right, it's time for you to use me.
Wow, that's like, it feels like this process of like, you are letting go of, but at the same time, like you're giving new context, right? And so like, even though you are saying maybe goodbye or like ruining something or destroying something or otherwise rendering it into a totally different object, it doesn't, again, like negate the purposefulness and the meaningfulness of the object. It gives it a new condition for existing.
Yes.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you think of an idea and then you go about bringing it to life as opposed to making something and then figuring out why you made it. And so
the flags were that way.
Yes. But usually, right, you think of an idea and then you go about and bring it to life. And so can you talk a little bit about what those provocations feel like for you? Do they come to you kind of fully formed, or is it like more of a navigation into like a little glimpse of an idea?
It's a navigation. This depression glass was my grandmother's.
Oh, wow.
And they sat in the kitchen on the very top,
where the important stuff
gathered
goes.
dust. And once I started this situation and this perseverance suite, I looked up and thought, I'll use those as well.
Right. It's your time. Your time to shine.
That's right.
And so are you... Can you talk a little bit more about your own idea forming? And like when you're working with the material, when you're choosing material, what does that look like for you? Are you like, this means this is the semiotics of this, and so I'm going to use this like this, or like
no,
not prefabricated?
The idea comes, and then I go into the studio and I think, this might work. And I'm sure you find the same thing. You go into the studio and I think, no, I'll just use that. And the material says, yes, I can do that. And sometimes the material says, no, I can't do that. So you've got to rethink what you thought at 2 in the morning.
When the material doesn't cooperate, how much do you make it, or how much do you try and force it to your will, if any?
You can't.
No?
You can't. You try, but usually it, and then you cry.
Oh my God, that's too real.
That has happened to me multiple times. The crying and the material not cooperating.
And the
I think there are many artists.
And the language. Yeah.
That's my thing that I've seen through your process. Like you create this communication, not just with the audience, but also with the material that you're working with. And it seems that I like intuitively, and your intuition is so great and powerful that I like, which material to choose and which material like not to choose at the moment. But how do you, like, I'm still in awe, like how do you develop that intuition and that relationship with the material? Because I feel, especially us as students, like sometimes we have courses that are like, they're focused on lessons of practice, like, I don't know, sculpting with clay or sculpting with that, and it's so formal. But it seems yours is really natural, and it comes like trusting yourself. How do you develop that voice and your trust in yourself and that communication with that material?
This came fully formed, this idea, with the chain and the yarn. But you're only seeing what I let you see.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that goes in the dumpster.
Yeah. Got you.
It's very different when in the studio. There are things that I've started and they don't work out, and you just leave them for a bit, or you go back to them, or you never go back to them.
Is there any material that you haven't tried that you are dying to try?
I'd like to play the piano. I'd like to be fluent in French. No, not really.
No, really. Okay.
What have you found that you besides Rust, because I know that you really like that, but when you're working with something and it's not working out, and you feel like you're struggling with it, how do you, like you said, you put it aside and you come back to it, like, but do you come back to the idea? Like,
Yeah.
Are you saying, like, this is a good idea and I want to find a way to make it work, and so I'm going to be persistent with the material and try and find the language that is acceptable for the idea? Like, or do you often find yourself like having an idea and being like, I'm gonna like just kind of leave that and move on to the next thing?
I think about a lot of things, and I do put things aside and come back to them, and sometimes I don't come back to them.
Do you feel like sometimes when you don't come back to them, the idea comes back to you, but maybe in a different manner? Because I often find the kind of similar themes and similar ideas keep resurfacing for me in my practice, and I think a lot of artists feel like that there are these kind of core ideas that keep getting reiterated in different language.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so like even maybe when you're putting a work aside, it's not maybe its final resting place, because the idea can still come back in a new seed and potentially be generative as well.
Yes, sometimes.
Yeah,
and
or it's
sometimes you just say, all right, you've got to give it up.
That's fair.
You know that you work so much with memory. And sometimes you have discovery that are like other people remember things differently than your experiences.
You're talking about when I started, when I had the conversation with my sister.
Yes. That I find it fascinating, because I never saw it like that way. That are like people can have like a same experience, but
Can
remember
I just
different things.
tell them it was myself having a conversation with my sister, who was 18 months younger than me, so we sort of grew up like twins, and we were just discussing something that had happened, and I was shocked to find that she remembered it completely differently than I did. And I was angry. I couldn't believe that, and that was the reason I began dealing with memory, and how elusive it is, and how you are usually the star of your memory, like in your dreams, and how it fools you and betrays you in such a way. So that was the impetus for me to begin thinking about quotes, idioms, things my grandmother said, why they were said.
I find it so fascinating, because like I feel like sometimes the memory becomes something else, and it's just its own object or its own concept, and then it's not just that it's misleading, but I think it is a memory of the memory in a way, and it is like sometimes, and you work that in Whispering City too.
Yes, for Whispering City, you shape it the way you need it to be, the way you need to remember it.
Yeah, exactly. Beautiful.
That's kind of interesting that like you are willing and totally receptive to shaping the memory to your advantage or your kind of concept, but like maybe less willing to shape material to that concept and more working with it as it is or as it comes to you.
Yes.
And so like you're almost shaping yourself around the material that you work with and creating this autobiographical-ish body of work that it speaks to what it is, but it also speaks to the way that you have conceived of your own existence, right, in your own life.
Yes.
It's different, June, because like speaking to you, it is different from listening to you talk to other interviewers, and I kind of half believed that like that the process wasn't so autobiographical, that like there was something like else that like we're talking about something else, we're talking about other things, but like it really is so grounded in your own understandings of the world, right? Mm-hmm. And so how does the work function now that like you're getting later into your career? Are you looking back at the work as this kind of like memory bank that you have made physical and like to understand your own place in the world, or like
I wouldn't say that. I mean, I'm looking at these things that I did in the 90s, or these quotes that I don't remember making these things. I don't remember why I did certain pieces.
Like what the catalyst was.
For instance, you saw the photograph of this.
Yeah.
And someone made that quote to me, and then I married it with that image because it seemed to work.
Right. And like in doing that, you are still looking for something familiar to yourself or something that's resonant with yourself.
Yes.
And
yes,
so
yes.
it is this process of coming back to the self again and again and again, and almost like through
trying to figure me out.
Yeah, like a lifelong process of like, who the hell am I, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting that it is so kind of focused on your own reckoning with your place in the world and your memories in the world, because it's also so accessible. Like your art is instantly kind of understandable and elusive all at the same time. Like I told you that I went into the Unrequited Love show at the AGO, and instantly I understood it as this kind of reckoning with this national symbol of like
to terms.
Yeah, and like I understood it less through a personal lens and more through a kind of cultural or structural lens.
Yes.
And so it took me a while to believe you when you were talking that like this is about me. Like this isn't about like America necessarily or the state of the world, that like this is June's reckoning with June's life.
Yes, yes.
And like how do you think that it can be so personal, like your work can be so personal and also accessible at the same time? Do you navigate that, or is that something that just kind of like a happy accident? You're gonna say happy
happens.
accident, yeah.
I think for me, I can't say for other people, but I think I would teach that as well. When you come to try and direct the viewer, I think you're probably not making art. I think you need to come from here, and usually if it's true, it will resonate. But trying to, I can't make raised fist art. I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
I'm not didactic in that way.
Yeah. Huh. So, there's room almost like for everybody to bring their own experience and their own kind of interpretation into the art and read it as they do. But you say that you don't direct the viewer's understanding.
I try not to. I don't know if I do.
I think that to an extent, like for me, I see it as a direction, but like less like a this is what to think so much as like this is what I'm thinking. What's your take on it, kind of thing? As like you're sending out feelers into the world, and people can take what they want from the work.
What they need from it. Yes.
Interesting.
through your career also you were a professor, and you taught, and you taught yourself so many things, and you also teach others. How that informed your practice and how that changed you too?
I don't know about the teachers here. I used to, when I started, I used to say it'll feed my work and I'll feed them. No, no. For me, after a day of teaching, I just want to go home, turn the TV on and have it just talk to me. Students drain you.
Sorry.
Drain you. And if you're doing it well, I think, you know, you don't have that energy. You gotta give your energy to your teaching, I think.
Do you find that like you're still like you don't have any current positions that are in that kind of teaching role or facilitator role, but do you find yourself still taking on that role within your life or within your family or community, or how does that work? Because I know that once a teacher, always a teacher kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't kind of go
if
back.
you come to my studio, I can, you know, talk to you or whatever, but not in a formal way.
Right. Okay. And so, you've said that like, oh wait, no wait, hold on. Wow. Light is an essential element that you work with. So metaphorically, you bring the light to many topics: family secrets, maybe toxic nationalism, domesticity. Are there any things that you would like to shine a light on that we haven't touched on tonight?
No, just, I don't think so. I think that this has been incredibly interesting. I didn't know really what to expect, but I'm in awe of your research and your interest and your way of thinking.
Yeah, I think one last question that I'm really interested in is like, there's any theories that are your like kind of like an academic work, especially from a university perspective, that you are fascinated by or you're still using in your career, or like no, something that I like.
No, I'm very intuitive. I don't think in terms of theories or things like that.
Interesting.
I think that's so funny, right? Because like I was saying to Luisé before we started, like you can use intuition at university as long as you have a theory behind it. And so I think it's almost refreshing to talk to someone who's like, no, I'm not prescribing to that. And it counters kind of the traditional academic model and the way that we're taught to think about our own practices in relation to other people, because you are, whether or not you're cognizant of it, like you're employing theorists' ideas intuitively, which I think is really interesting, because like, you know, we could write papers on different lenses to analyze your work, but at the end of the day, like it is this kind of personal understanding, and so it comes from within, right? Like
yes.
The ideas come from within, and it's not necessarily being shaped through external forces.
I'm not a writer, and when
who do you get to do your writing for you?
Yes, exactly. That's someone else's job, really. And when I taught, I always said, just do your own work. They can't write until you make.
Yeah.
Don't be led by the writers.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I've talked to several kind of university students about, because there is this kind of idea that like you need to think about the idea in terms of like the theory behind it, and then like go about bringing it to practice. But there's this kind of switch in students where we're like more in favor of making the work and then kind of coming to terms with what it means and learning the kind of theory afterwards, like taking the work and fitting it into theory.
Surprise yourself.
Yeah, and like that's honestly like where a lot of that kind of innovation and inventive thinking comes from. And if we feel like we can be kind of bogged down by, well, you know, like Freud thinks this, so I should think this kind of thing. Yeah, it can be a little bit like stifling. So that's very refreshing. And I have one last question here. Is you've said that you tap into a collective unconscious, and are mindful that there is a collective need for realization, reclamation, and redemption. So is this reclamation and redemption ever going to be finished?
No, well, probably not.
Yeah.
Because trunks keep being born.
Yeah, yeah.
And we
we
have to
keep
deal with it.
propping them up. Yeah. And so is there a possibility for other artists to pick up where you leave off?
Have I left off?
When you leave, when you leave off. I worded that carefully.
I don't know. I'd have. That's not up to me.
That's not your duty, yeah.
No.
I think I can answer that question. I think that there is a possibility because Max, our mentor, recently said like the act of coming together with students and sharing with students, sharing the perspective is the work of the artist and of the established artist. That like you are sharing your practice, and in doing that sharing, you're giving us permission to make our own art and come to our own kind of terms
yes,
with things.
and
Yeah.
those who've come before me gave me permission.
Yeah.
Wow.
I was actually thinking about this in terms of permission. Sorry, I know I said my last question, but in terms of permission, I was thinking about the artist. The artist doesn't ask for permission so much as they take permission. They take permission and they create ideas with it or create work with it. And so
Some artists do. Yeah.
and so is the act of allowing yourself permission part of the work? That like we're allowed to talk about these things, we're allowed to kind of engage in cultural society, and we're allowed to find our own voices and make our own voices.
I have to give myself permission and re-give it and re-give it, and especially when you're starting on something new, you just have to. This piece I'm working on for the Studio Museum, I had to walk away from it because first of all, I find if I work too long and too tired, then I make mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I have to walk away and stay away for a day or two so that I can come back to it, because after a while and you're working on it for so long, you know, in your head,
Yeah.
shit.
I'm
And it says, go away, leave me alone.
And too, like they talk about this, like I'm a painter, and so they talk about like this idea that like you can't, when you look at something for too long, you can't see it anymore. And so is that true? You find that true with sculpture, that like when you look at something for too long, you're like, this is meaningless, and it doesn't, just looks like, you know, heap of pile on the floor. And so the idea of like you can come back with it with fresh eyes and perhaps fresh ideas, or see things that you hadn't seen before because of that kind of fatigue. And so that's similar in sculpture as well, eh?
Oh, and I think in anything. I think in writing.
Yeah?
As well.
Yeah, in writing, definitely. In writing.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay, well, I think that's all we have for you, June. And
Thank you so much.
thank you for coming. We've really enjoyed finally getting to sit down and have a conversation with you.